Thank you very much. Oh, that's right. Speaking of customers, suddenly coming to mind, I began to speak while heating some water. This happened yesterday, but... Right, I was like, oh no, and panicked. The two men were both out yesterday, so it was a good opportunity to talk about it. I tell them of the boy that suddenly just came into the store, and the two looked at each other in bewilderment. But of course, it happens on my watch, so I'm not particularly surprised at this point.
Enchante の結界の特性上、そういったことも可能性としてありえない話ではないが。
Also, according to Mizir's judgment, the boy seemed like he was a non-human.
おお、それは驚きの連続ってやつだね。
Right, though I don't know if it was by his power, but for a moment yesterday, the piping and everything had frozen over. If you just looked at him, he seemed like a normal boy. That made me even more surprised. After sharing the information I had, Mr. Rindo mutters behind the steam from his Americano.
と言ってもさ、昨日だけの来店なら単なる偶然で片付くんじゃない？僕がここに来るようになった数年の間でも何回かはそういう偶然があったって話は聞いてるし。
そうだな。GPM のように店を襲撃してくるわけでもなし、特に気にせずでよいだろ
う。その説はご迷惑を。
It's true. Candace is right. It's not like we have to get into a panic just because someone new came into the cafe. And I mean, a cafe that panics over customers coming in already seems problematic.
というか、仮にアンシャンテ常連に人外が増えたら、また僕の仕事が増えるんだな。大変。
アンシャンテとしては良いことかもしれんだろう。諦めて仕事に精進することだな。
これでも真面目にやってるんだけどね。実を言うと、うちの部署とか今メディオの件でてんてこまいなんだよ。
What about Medio? Wait, was there some kind of problem because we all went to Medio? I nervously asked my question, but Mr. Rindo laughs and waves his hand, dismissing my concerns.
誰がどうこうとか、世界の危機がとか、そんなんじゃないよ。というか、誰かのせいって言うなら、僕自身のせいだし。
What'd you do? Depending on who you ask, information on the Fairy World Medio is inside the GPM is scarce. It's considered an unusual world. Normally, written reports or testimonies by Canis would have been enough.
僕が生で妖精の動画を撮った件とか、あとはサンプルにいいかなって数枚頂戴した落ち葉とか草花がね。
What?
もう開発班に大受けでさ、おまけに詳しく話を聞かせろって連日朝から晩まで捕まっちゃって。
It seemed like Mr. Rindo hadn't shown up here as much. Let me read that again. It seemed like Mr. Rindo hadn't shown up here much after coming back from Medio. I suppose that's what's been going on. I see. It must have been something considering the work the GPM does.
まあいっそ 現地住人のカヌスに任意同行してもらって、そのまま話をしてもらいたいくらいだよ。
断る。先ほど自分で言っていたろう。まさに自業自得ではないか。それにベスティアのように GPM が頻繁にやってきてはティターニアたちに申し訳が立たぬ。
There was one word that hit me. Bestia? You mean Ignis's homeworld, right? What sort of connection does his world and Bestia have? Canis nods deeply, as if acknowledging my question.
我もイグニスから聞いた話なのだが、GPM は何らかの方法でベスティアへと直接干渉していると聞く。
Oh shit.
イグニス本人もベスティアで幾度も人の群れを見かけているらしいからな。
Somehow able to travel. Wait, does that? Excuse me. Wait, does the GPM also have a gate that goes to alternate worlds like ours? Excuse me. Canis and I look toward Mr. Rindo.
惜しい。ほぼ正解だけど、本部にあるのはゲートじゃないよ。
He pours some milk into his Americano and puts up two fingers.
確か前に説明があったと思うけどさ、異世界に行くための方法として2種類の転送法があるってやつ。
Ah, right. You're talking about gates and wormholes? I recall the conversation we had about homeworlds just before going to Media. Just like the one in Enchante, there are several gates that connect to alternate worlds. And there are wormholes, distortions in space that appear haphazardly. You can only travel in one direction through them, and they are incredibly unstable. If you happen to fall into one, it would be nothing but unfortunate. That's how it was explained to me. So then the GPM headquarters has a wormhole?
そう。普通ホールって言ったらどんなに長くても数日程度で閉じるはずなんだけど、何を思ったのか、うちに所属している変態で天才な変態がそれを固定開閉できるようにしちゃってね。その結果、ベスティアについては固定した直通路が確保されていてね、飛躍的に研究調査が進んでるんだ。
Oh wow, I didn't know that was possible.
GPM も伊達に国家組織を名乗ってはいないが、人材の層も厚いように思える。
どうかな。規格外に優秀なやつってどこにでもいるもんじゃない？性格とか人格とかはさておきね。
A crazy genius. I wonder what kind of person they are to be called something like that. I wonder indeed.
ごちそうさま。さてさて、仕事地獄なおじさんは今からもう一頑張りかな。
Good luck.
根を詰めすぎるな。お前もよく言うように、人は脆いのだから。
なんだろう、心配されてるのは嬉しいんだけど、年齢的な意味で言われてる気がするよ。
Kaoru, sweetheart, are you senile? You just called yourself old not too long ago.
気のせいだ。
I take his payment, and Mr. Rindo begins to put on his suit.
そうだ、琴音ちゃん。話が戻っちゃうんだけどさ。ここに来た人外の男の子について、聞いた話じゃ、害をなすような子じゃないとは思うけど。念のため、僕の方でも GPM のデータベースを紹介してみるよ。何か特徴とか覚えてる限りで教えてもらえるかな。目鼻立ちでも会話の仕方でも。
Features, huh? I try to think back on what I saw that day. Just by looking at him, he really did look like an ordinary middle schooler. Maybe about 160 centimeters tall, and he had a slender build. As for features that stood out, one thing stood out in particular. That boy had really beautiful white hair. That's right, he had shiny silken white hair that would stand out even if he was in the middle of town. You know him?
氷を使う白髪のもの。
The one who reacted to what I said was not Mr. Rindo, but Kanas. Kanas?
なるほどね。そこまで特徴があるなら探すのは難しくなさそうだ。何か分かったら報告するよ。
リンド、その報告できれば我にも届けてもらえるだろうか。
それはもちろんいいけど、何か気がかりなことでも？
いや、これは勘と言うべきなのか。ともかく調べてもらえるとありがたい。
了解。頑張りますよと。
Late at night before the next day.
いや、調べるとは言ったけどさ、普通報告した途端に即作業しろとか言う？
Complaining about the higher up asking for the impossible. Rindo Kaoru, I don't know why they do that, holds a cup of instant noodles. Yeah, shit. I just wanted to say noodles. For the impossible, Rindo Kaoru holds a cup of instant coffee in a room that, aside from him, was vacant. He was working overtime.
ああ、やだやだ。僕もいつかの琴音ちゃんじゃないけど、老期に訴えてやろうかな。
Coffee wasn't necessarily bad. I do miss the taste of Enchante though. But I suppose that this does come with a nice price. It's free. Can't be too picky given the situation.
で、例の謎の少年の特徴はと。
My fingers brushing against key after key, I enter in the information. I'm accessing the database of confirmed non-humans in the human world. So essentially an encyclopedia of people to watch out for. I don't feel great that I have to use this though.
身長と年齢、髪の色。あとは能力と報告年数で絞って。おいっと。
And right after I press the enter key,
ジャストで該当。てっきり未確認の人外だと思ってたけど、登録されてるもんだね。名前は安倍刈谷君ね。 14歳の中学2年生。体が弱く学校を休みがち。登録されてる理由はと。
Rindo's face went stern at the text displayed on his computer.
チェンジリング。
Changeling. Changelings. A well-known part of folklore passed down from olden Europe. A phenomenon where a human child that was just born could be taken away by a fairy on a whim in exchange with a baby fairy.
っていう感じで人間界には伝わってたかな。
So that's why I kind of knew about him. In that case, he might be related to many of this Karya Abe kid.
カヌスが気にかけてたことに関係があるのかな。
While in thought, I sipped my instant coffee.
おやおや、そこにいるのは
Who is this?
情報課課長こと人外ひしめくアンシャンテの監視役などという羨ましくもけしからん役目を任されている林道薫ではないかね。
Yikes. Man. It's like anime Dexter from Dexter's Lab. But, man, I don't know why you couldn't decide on a hair color. Either go teal or go brunette. Jeez Louise. The hell he got in his hand? Looks like some sort of mythical fox thing. It looks cute though. Not this guy. It was practically spelled out on his face. Rendo's poker face was usually very good, but it just fell apart here. Let me read it. This guy here in this place had a look that suggested he might have just broken out of jail, or maybe a foster home. But no, he was Rendo's old friend, the chief of development, Akira Mikado. Akira Mikado, a colleague of Rendo and the head of the GPM development division. Despite his childlike appearance, he is a highly talented scientist. He was none other than the crazy genius.
やあやあ、今日も残業ご苦労様だね。それともアンシャンテでまた何か新しい発見でもしたのかな。妬ましい、羨ましい。ただでさえレア中のレアな人外に囲まれる天国のような生活を約束されているというのに、しかも GPM 史上初の妖精界メディオの現地域まで、なぜ僕に黙っていたのかね、白状者。
After receiving a barrage of words, a heavy fatigue fell over me.
あのさ、ミカド。僕一人しかいないとはいえ、職場で大声出すのはどうかと思うよ。あと前も言ったけど、お前を連れて行くとさ、あそこの人外図からの信頼がさらに失われちゃうわけだよ。血液採取を挨拶代わりにするような変態科学者様は、自重って言葉を知らないみたいだしね。
仕方あるまい。人外とはそれだけ魅力的な存在なのだから。だいたい君の信頼よりも人類の至宝たる頭脳つまりはこの僕の学術的好奇心の方がはるかに価値が高いに決まっているじゃないか。養成所ティターニア、僕も会ってみたかった。それはもうきっ とてつもなく表現のしようがないほどに素晴らしい人外なのだろうね。
Alright. You're a little eccentric. Rindo praises his past self for not taking along this walking disaster of a freak who could barely keep his breathing in check. And also, because he knew that the reason this guy wanted to meet and research non-humans wasn't just because he was curious.
まったくリンドウは意地が悪いにも程があるねえクーちゃん。
Kujan. The fox likes stuffed toy that Akira... Oh, it's... Yeah, it didn't even make a sound, so I get it. The fox likes stuffed toy that Akira Mikado always carries. Akira was tilting his head toward and talking to the stuffed animal on his shoulder. Rindo let out a sigh. Moments after, Rindo realized he was making a pretty nasty face. He decided to hold his tongue.
ああ、それでリンド。結局、君はまずそうなコーヒーをすすりつつ、業務時間外に何をしていたのかね。
ああ、まあちょっと調べ物をな。
どれどれ。
こら、何を勝手に。
His body was small enough to slip by, and Akira swooped up the computer Rindo was using for his research.
おお、チェンジリングか。ロマンがあるよね。またの名を先祖返りとも言う。しかし、へえ、この個体すごいじゃないか。
何がさ。
だってずいぶん長生きしてるじゃないか。チェンジリングの対象者はだいたい5年持てばいい方さ。おや、知らなかったのかい。まあでもそうか。情報科課長といえど全ての人外の知識があるわけではないか。
Mikado flutters his coat as he boasts.
何しろ本来人間界にいるべきでない存在だ。生まれる世界を間違えて誕生してしまったものなのだから。そうだな。例えて言うなら人間がうっかり猛毒の空気の中に生まれたようなものだね。いやー、10年以上生きてる個体なんて極めて珍しい存在だと断言できるよ。それで君はなんで彼を調べてたんだい。捕まえて研究対象にしていいの？
Ew, no. Ignoring Mikado and his comment that strayed him further away from humanity, Rindo thinks seriously for a moment.
人間界では長く生きられない妖精がアンシャンテを訪れた理由。偶然なら別にいい。でもそれ以外だとしたら理由は何だ。同じ妖精であるカヌスの存在に気づいた。それとも自分の体の不調から無意識のうちにメディオの気配に引き寄せられた。
It wasn't impossible.
でももしそうだとしたら猶予はもうほとんどない。
With a serious face on, Rindo begins to move. The next GPM mission was unfolding. The next day, With the information that I unfortunately had to go to Mikado for, I quickly drove into action. Protection of friendly non-humans. If the GGM truly believes that is one of its purposes, there's only one thing that I can do. That I felt like I'm adding words. If the GPM truly believes that is one of its purposes, there's only one thing I could do. Under a raining sky, pouring down like running fuel.
たく、なんで俺がてめえの用事に付き合わなきゃなんねんだよ。
悪いね。後で美味しいお肉を折るからさ。
It was a pretty sudden request. I guess I can't blame Ignis for complaining. Honestly, I would have rather spoken with Thomas as this is a media matter.
彼、タイミング悪くメディオで外せない用事があるみたいでさ。
まあ護衛っつってもガキが相手だろ。散歩ついでにやってやら。
I needed a fill-in for Thomas, so here we are. Ignis is good enough, especially if I needed him as the pet for a fight. Yeah, the boy likes to scrap. We continue walking in search for the boy. I already contacted Katone and told her about Karia Abe, really was, and the fact that, let me read this again. I already contacted Katone and told her about who Karia Abe really was, and the danger he was facing. I'm sure we could save the details about changelings once. Let me read this. I'm sure we can save the details about changelings later once we regroup with Kanis.
話をしておとなしくついてきてくれればいいんだけどな。
つか、肝心のそのガキはどこにいやがんだよ。家にもいなかったんだろ。
少なくとも今の家族との不仲ではないみたいだけどね。むしろかなり関係としては良好みたいだ。ただガリア君自身がかなり放浪癖があるのか、ほとんど家にはいないみたいでね。
じゃあ地道に探すしかねえってか。
まさか。これでも僕は情報家だよ。彼の自宅に寄ったのはあくまで保険。目撃情報やその他もろもろ。彼がいる可能性が高い場所くらいはちゃんと目星をつけてるって。
With that, we arrive at a spot about 30 minutes away from Enchante.
これはまた素敵な隠れ家をチョイスしたね。
We arrived at the warehouse of an abandoned factory. There were stains of rust all over it. Holes filled the walls and the roof. They were useless against the rain that was falling now. It was a pretty wide building. It didn't feel cramped in the slightest. But thinking about a young kid spending time out here all alone, I can't say it was making me feel great.
さて、それじゃあ中でお仕事と行きますか。
なんかあれば呼べよ。人通り見張っておいてやっから。
どうも。イグニスは常識があって助かるよ。まあとりあえずは僕に任せておいて。
I slowly opened the rusty door. I deliberately made my footsteps heard. There was a small shadow of a figure standing in the back. I began to speak. What's wrong? Right. It was the boy, gripping his chest. He seemed in pain and was breathing heavily.
いや、ちょっといいかな。
何あんた。
そんなに警戒しなくても僕は怪しいものじゃないよ。
どこが？いきなり慣れ慣れしく話しかけてくるし、いい大人が平日なのにぶらついてるし。
Yeah, it do look pretty sus, Kaoru. Not gonna lie.
どっからどう見ても怪しい中年のおじさんなんだけど。
一理あるね。
He's probably making that face look like when Betty had called him an old man too. I accepted what it looked like. It took a minute to just stand there, excuse me, and just talk.
説明が難しいんだけど、僕はほんの少し君と話がしたいだけなんだよ。安部刈谷君。
なんで俺の名前？
ほら、君先日妙なアンシャンテっていう喫茶店に寄っただろう。それさ、どうして立ち寄ったのか理由を教えてもらえないかな。答えづらいなら僕から言おうか。君は原因不明の体調不良で苦しんでた時、引き寄せられるように店に入った。それでちょっと体が楽になった。違うかな。
どうして俺の体調のことまで。
A look of panic was colored clearly. Like a tongue twister. A look of panic was colored clearly across the boy's face, still gazing right at him.
決まってる。君が体調不良で辛い思いをしてるのも、人と違うことで苦しむのも。
I made sure I didn't sugarcoat it because he had to see the truth.
君が人間じゃないからさ。
Yep. Uh-oh. The temperature around us dropped suddenly. I could feel the cold air begin to envelop me. I knew it. He does understand he has this ability. So what he really is...
突然のことで理解できないかもしれない。でも聞いてほしい。君はただの人間じゃなくて、元来別の世界に生まれるはずだった妖精。その氷を司る力も、それが理由だ。
I really needed to calm him before he starts demonstrating his full powers.
大丈夫。僕は君の味方だ。それと、あの喫茶店のマスターも。一応専門の機関に所属しててね。君みたいな力を持つ者に対してはそれなりに詳しいんだ。心配しなくてもいいよ。妖精についても少しは研究も進んでる。だからきっと君のことも。
研究？
Before I realized it, it was too late. At the sound of that word, the boy began glaring as if I attacked him.
やだ。
However, his rejection was at a far greater level than I expected.
研究ってまた俺を監禁して調査するんだろ。
Oh, shit, it's happened before.
珍獣みたいに、動物みたいに、みんなで囲んで笑い物にしながら。
Just with that, I put together what kind of past he had been through.
だからあんただって同じだろ。信用できる要素なんて一つもない。
きっと君はその体で辛い目にあったんだろう。なら僕が信用できないのもわかる。 僕も引けないんだよ。君が僕を信じられないとしても、僕は君みたいな子を何が何でも保護しなきゃいけない。
は？保護？捕獲じゃなくて。いい
え、保護で合ってるよ。君がその力で誰かを傷つける前に守りたいんだ。何より君自身をね。
されるつもりはないって言ったら。
I don't think he's coming this way. I figured it might come to this.
僕は僕の仕事をするまでさ。君こそ僕相手にどうするんだい。その力を使ってみる。
そうだね。どんだけ悪どいやつもこの力で大体退けてきた。大人ってのはさ、痛い目を見なきゃ自分がどんだけのことをしてんのかわかんないんだよ。
かもね。案外大人の方が子供より物の善悪がわからないのかもしれない。
だったらもう
Oh my gosh.
俺のことは放っておいてくれよ。
Oh my gosh. The warehouse was filled with water from... Oh yeah, oh shit, this is not good. The warehouse was filled with water from the pouring rain. I jumped right before my feet would be frozen in the small bodies of water. However...
参ったな。ほっといたら死んじゃうから声をかけたんだけどね。
The reason why he's become so aggressive must be because he realized that his life is draining away.
というか、寒い。もうちょい着込んでくるべきだった。
I tried to run as the ice froze the warehouse. Then... Oh my gosh! Small projects of ice were flying toward me, but I managed to cut them down with a knife. Ooh,
派手にやるね。子供は後先考えないから怖いな。
But if a stranger came by talking about research and protection, I guess I expect a pretty intense response. So what do I do now? My mind is racing as I dodge his attacks.
やだやだ。
Sweetheart, calm down.
捕まったらまたあんなことになる。俺はやっとあったかい家族を手に入れたのに。
With a scream, the stacked wooden boxes crumbled, unable to handle the sudden change in temperature. The boy, probably losing his mind now, began screaming as if his life depended on it. Ignis, don't you hear that? What the hell? Changelings. This was not something born of the mischief of fairies. It was found in folklore. It was when fairy and human blood mixed, causing the chance for an ancestral relapse, giving fairy traits to a descendant. Kadia Abe is one of those beings. Unfortunately for him, his powers came shortly after he was born, and he was proven to be a non-human by those closest to him. Even his biological parents. Excuse me. What happened next was a classic tragedy. Afraid of Kadia, even though he was kin, they left him in solitude. He was completely neglected by his own parents. It seemed like there was no dissent in people. Oh, excuse me, I read that wrong. It seemed like there were no decent people in his life. He searched for help, but was persecuted and deceived instead. He ended up being sold into the darkest pits of society. Oh my gosh. There, he could have died at any moment. And there, his grandmother realized what happened. She came to save him from his living hell. Shortly after, though, she passed away. His relatives, that couple I'd gone to before coming here, were the ones that adopted and took Karya in. Even though they knew of his powers, they showed no fear nor pity to him. It was an honest love. It was pure. That's why.
それを奪われるなんて絶対に嫌だ
Oh my god. Yes, even if he died. Oh no, he got me. All of a sudden, it was hard to breathe. The tiny amounts of water in the air must have begun to freeze. And not only that, I could feel his gaze on me. He must have been staring to see when I stopped moving. I felt like the very blood in my body was beginning to freeze. I really didn't think it was this strong. Hello, Ignis, are you there? I'm kind of struggling right now. I dropped to my knees, and right as I began to lose consciousness, there we go.
せえな、ビキビキバキバキやかましい。なんかあったら呼べっつったのか。
Where were you? Like a comet, the demon beast of fire comes crashing down with a roar. He was adorned with fire, and the flames melted all the ice around the warehouse. Karya's body flinches at the suddenly rising temperature within the warehouse.
Nice timing.
Duh. Ice's natural enemy is fire. That's a fact even a child would know. As soon as I caught my breath, I ran to him. I catch Karya's frail body as it began to fall forward.
とりあえず一件落着かな。彼も目立った外傷はないし。でもイグニス、君の炎はこの子に負担が大きいみたいだ。悪いけど抑えてくれると助かるよ。
見りゃわかる。つうか、俺の炎とか関係なく、そいつかなりやべえんじゃねえか。
ああ、思ってたより数倍ね。一刻の猶予もない。これはもう本人の同意なんて取ってる場合じゃないね。
Oh, does he feel bad that he damn near roasted the kid? My fingers, shivering from the cold, began to dial a number. It was Katone's.
もしもし、琴音ちゃん。例の少年ひとまず保護したよ。それとカヌスは戻ってるかな。あ、それなら話は早い。カヌスに伝えておいて。妖精界メディオへすぐにゲートをつなげられるようにってね。
I was wondering about this because the kid was hostile at this moment. they're gonna ship him back to Fairy World